The bullet doesn't come. Carlo Benedetti sits against what remains of a stone wall on Hill 340, hands bound behind him with American wire cutting into his wrists. Blood seeps through his shirt from the shoulder wound, warm and sticky in the Sicilian heat. His mouth tastes like copper and dust. The sun overhead is brutal, turning the world white at the edges. He's been a sniper for 9 months. 17 men. He stopped carving notches when his spotter made him, but the number lives in his head anyway. 17 times he squeezed the trigger. 17 times he watched through the scope as the target dropped. Now he's the target. He knows the arithmetic. The Americans found his hide 2 hours ago. His spotter broke immediately, screamed their position when the mortars started walking up the hillside. They pulled Carlo out by his boot heels while he was still bleeding. Zip-tied his hands, left him here against this wall while they cleared the rest of the position. He waits for the pistol, the rifle butt, the boot, something. Instead, footsteps. American boots on broken stone. Carlo keeps his eyes closed. If they want to shoot him in the back of the head, fine. He won't give them the satisfaction of begging. Jesus Christ, he's just a kid. English. Carlo doesn't understand the words, but he knows the tone. Someone kneels in front of him. Carlo opens his eyes. The man wears an American medic's armband, 30s maybe, dark hair, tired eyes behind round spectacles. He's got a medical kit already open, hands moving with practiced efficiency. He reaches for Carlo's wrists. Carlo flinches. The medic says something else in English, the tone softer now, reassuring, and pulls out a knife. Carlo tenses, but the blade just cuts through the wire. His hands fall free. The relief is immediate and agonizing, blood rushing back into his fingers and hot needles. The medic sets down the knife and reaches for Carlo's shoulder. His hands probe the wound. Not rough, but not gentle either. Professional. Carlo gasps when the fingers find the exit hole. Through and through, the medic mutters, though Carlo doesn't catch the words. Lucky son of a bitch. The medic pulls out a canteen. American issue. He unscrews the cap and holds it to Carlo's lips. Carlo stares at it. This isn't dregs. This isn't a sadistic game where they give you hope before yanking it away. The canteen is full. Fresh water. The medic tips it, and Carlo drinks. The water tastes like metal and salvation. Then morphine. The medic produces a syringe, taps it twice, and jabs it into Carlo's thigh right through the filthy trousers. The sting is nothing compared to the shoulder. Within 30 seconds, the world starts to blur at the edges. The pain doesn't disappear, but it steps back, becomes something happening to someone else. The medic works on the wound properly now, cuts away the shirt, pours sulfa powder that burns like acid. Carlo bites down on his own tongue to keep from screaming. Gauze pads front and back. Bandages wrapped tight enough to hold, but not tight enough to cut off circulation. The medic's hands move with the same care, the same attention, that Carlo once gave to cleaning his rifle. That's when it hits him. They know. His spotter talked. Everyone heard him screaming their position, screaming that Carlo was the shooter, screaming everything. These Americans know exactly what Carlo is, know about the 17, know he was killing their brothers 6 hours ago. They know, and this medic is still patching him up. Carlo's vision blurs, but not from the morphine. His throat closes. He tries to stop it, tries to maintain something, some shred of dignity, but it's useless. The tears come hot and fast, cutting tracks through the dust caked on his face. The medic finishes the bandage, pats Carlo's good shoulder once, twice, then he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a pack of cigarettes. Lucky strikes. He shakes one loose, puts it between Carlo's lips, and lights it with a Zippo that catches on the first try. Carlo inhales. The smoke burns his lungs, but he doesn't care. He sits there against the shattered wall, smoking an American cigarette, bandaged by American hands, crying like he hasn't cried since he was a child. The medic says something else, something that might be kind, might be dismissive, Carlo will never know, and moves on to the next casualty. Just like that. No ceremony. No pronouncement. Just another wounded man triaged and treated. Carlo watches him go. The medic kneels beside a German now, a German, and starts the same routine. Cuts the bonds, offers water, checks the wounds. 2 Italian soldiers guard Carlo, but they're not watching him. They're watching the medic work. One of them, barely 20, has the same expression Carlo can feel on his own face. Complete incomprehension. Carlo draws on the cigarette again. His hands shake so badly he nearly drops it. He thinks about the propaganda, about what his commanding officer said before they shipped out. If captured, expect no mercy from the Americans. They are gangsters in uniform, mongrels. They will torture you, execute you. Only we understand military honor. He thinks about the Ethiopian prisoners he saw in 37, left in the sun without water until their tongues swelled black, about the partisan they caught near Rome who lived for 3 days after the interrogation. The cigarette burns down to his fingers. He drops it, can't even feel it land. The morphine is pulling him under now, making the world soft and distant. But before the darkness takes him, one thought cuts through with perfect clarity. They spared me. I wouldn't have done the same. That knowledge settles into his chest next to the 17 notches, heavy as stone, permanent as scars. The medic's hands were kind. The water was real. The morphine has stopped the pain, and Carlo Benedetti, sniper, killer of 17 men, has just learned that his enemy is more honorable than he is. He closes his eyes, this time not in fear, this time in shame. The metal cot frame creaked when Carlo shifted his weight. 3 days since Hill 340, and someone had moved him twice, first to a tent near the beach where generators hummed through the night, now here. Each time they loaded him onto a truck, his hands clenched around the cot rails, waiting for the vehicle to stop in some empty field where cleanup happened quietly. It never came. Instead, canvas stretched over wooden frames. Rows of cots, the sharp tang of antiseptic cutting through the July heat. He counted 40 beds, maybe 50. American wounded on the left side near the surgical station. German and Italian POWs on the right, mixed together like someone had simply run out of space to segregate them properly. Carlo's shoulder throbbed despite the morphine. The bandage was clean, changed that morning by an orderly who'd worked with the same brisk efficiency whether treating Americans or the men who'd been shooting at them 6 hours earlier. Footsteps approached. Light ones. The nurse looked maybe 23, her brown hair pinned back beneath a cap marked with red crosses. She carried a clipboard in one hand and a metal tray in the other. Carlo watched her eyes drop to the tag wired to his cot frame. Sniper. Written in English and Italian, just in case anyone missed the point. He'd seen that look before, the moment recognition hit, when people understood what he was. Usually their faces hardened, or they looked away, or they spat. She smiled instead. Tired, the kind of smile worn thin by too many shifts without sleep, but genuine. Come stai? Her Italian was terrible, the accent all wrong. He couldn't answer. His throat had closed. She checked his bandage anyway, her fingers gentle around the wound. Satisfied, she turned to the tray. Steam rose from a white bowl. Chicken soup. Carlo stared at it. Actual pieces of chicken floating in golden broth with carrots and... Were those noodles? Real egg noodles? He hadn't seen chicken since early 42, since before the rations got cut and cut again until they were eating polenta and whatever they could scavenge. The nurse placed the bowl on the small table beside his cot, added a spoon, adjusted his pillow so he could sit up easier. Then she moved to the next bed, a German corporal with shrapnel wounds across his chest. Same gentle hands, same tired smile. Carlo lifted the spoon. His hand shook. The first taste hit his tongue, and he had to close his eyes because the richness of it, the simple abundance, threatened to undo him completely. He ate slowly, savored it, tried not to think about the 17 men who would never taste chicken soup again because of him. 2 cots down, someone started screaming. Carlo's spoon clattered against the bowl. An American doctor materialized from behind a canvas divider, still wearing a blood-spattered apron from whatever surgery he'd just completed. He looked maybe 40, with deep lines carved around his eyes and gray threading through his dark hair, the kind of exhaustion that went bone deep. He moved to the German soldier thrashing in his cot. Not the corporal, a different one, an Unteroffizier whose left leg was wrapped in heavy bandages soaked through with red. The doctor called for assistance in English. 2 orderlies appeared. They held the German still while the doctor unwrapped the bandages with practiced efficiency. Carlo could see from his cot. The leg was bad. Shrapnel had shredded the muscle above the knee, and infection had set in despite the sulfa powder. The flesh around the wound had gone an ugly red-black. The German was crying now, begging in broken English. "Please, no cut, please." The doctor said something Carlo couldn't understand. His tone was firm, but not unkind. He called for instruments. For 90 minutes, Carlo watched the doctor work, watched him cut away dead tissue with a precision that spoke to thousands of hours of practice. Watched him clean the wound, pack it, dose it with precious penicillin. Watched him check the blood supply, adjust the angle of the leg, test the reflexes. The doctor could have taken the leg off in 20 minutes. Instead, he spent an hour and a half trying to save it. When he finally stepped back, his shoulders sagged. The orderlies applied fresh bandages. The German had passed out sometime during the procedure, his face gray beneath the tan. The doctor stripped off his gloves, dropped them in a bin, and moved immediately to the next cot. An Italian this time. A private from somewhere north, maybe Tuscany, with a sucking chest wound. The doctor examined him with the same meticulous attention, same careful hands, same determination. Then an American. A kid who couldn't have been more than 19, his arm shattered by a grenade fragment. The doctor set the bone, talking quietly to the kid the whole time, probably offering reassurance Carlo couldn't understand. Same hands, same care. Carlo thought about the Ethiopian prisoners in 37, the ones left in the sun without water because nobody wanted to waste it on them. Thought about the partisan his unit had caught near Rome in 41, the one his lieutenant had beaten to death with a shovel handle while the rest of them watched. Thought about what would happen to an American prisoner in German hands, in Italian hands. The soup in his stomach turned to lead. He rolled onto his side, grabbed for the bedpan hanging from his cot frame, and vomited. The chicken soup came up, wasted, splashing into the metal pan. His shoulder screamed at the movement, but he couldn't stop. His body heaved until there was nothing left but bile. Footsteps again. The nurse. Carlo waited for the disgust, for the anger at wasting good food. Instead, she brought water in a tin cup and a clean cloth. She helped him rinse his mouth, held the cup steady while his hands shook, wiped his face with the damp cloth. Her touch was gentle, kind. He wanted to tell her, wanted to confess that he didn't deserve this kindness, that the 17 men he'd killed through his scope had probably had nurses who cared about them, mothers who would never know their son's last moments, brothers who would wonder why the letters stopped coming. But his Italian failed him, and her English was useless, and all he could do was take the water she offered and whisper, "Grazie," through cracked lips. She patted his good shoulder, said something he didn't understand. The tone was reassuring. Then she moved to empty his bedpan, this young American woman cleaning up after an enemy sniper's vomit without hesitation or complaint. Carlo lay back on his cot, stared at the canvas ceiling, listened to the sounds of the hospital tent, groans of pain, quiet conversations, the doctor's voice giving orders, the scratch of pen on paper as someone updated medical charts. They were treating him, actually treating him. Not as a sniper, not as an enemy, just as a wounded man who needed help. The shame of it pressed down on his chest heavier than any wound. The processing center in Palermo smells like concrete dust and old sweat. Carlo's hands shake as they lead him down a corridor lined with other prisoners, Germans mostly, a few Italians. The guards separate him from the main group. This is where it happens. Interrogation rooms, where the real accounts get settled, away from the Red Cross observers and the field hospital witnesses. He's heard the stories from Ethiopia, from Spain, how prisoners get questioned, how some prisoners don't walk out. The guard opens a door. Carlo expects basement darkness, maybe a drain in the floor. Instead, a canvas-walled tent, afternoon light filtering through, and a small wooden table with 2 chairs. On the table, impossibly, 2 ceramic mugs releasing thin ribbons of steam into the air. The smell hits him before his eyes process what he's seeing. Coffee. Real coffee. Not the burnt barley substitute that's been Italy's national drink since 1941. The scent is so rich, so impossibly luxurious that for a moment he forgets to be terrified. "Sit down, Carlo." The man at the table is maybe 35, American captain's bars on his collar, but his Italian is flawless, better than Carlo's Sicilian accented version. Brooklyn accent underneath, but the grammar is perfect, the kind you only get at home. Captain Morrison gestures to the empty chair. The tent flap closes behind Carlo. He realizes slowly, with creeping disbelief, no guards, no weapons visible, just 2 chairs and that impossible coffee smell. "Go on." Morrison pushes 1 mug across the table. It's hot. Carlo sits because his legs won't hold him anymore. His fingers wrap around the warm ceramic. American made, he notices, stamped on the bottom. The coffee is black, strong, fresh. He hasn't seen fresh coffee since before the war. "Drink it before it gets cold." She drinks. The taste explodes across his tongue. Bitter, perfect, real. His eyes water. Morrison sips from his own mug, watching him with an expression Carlo can't read. "You killed Americans," Morrison says. Not a question. Conversational, almost. Carlo sets the mug down. His hands are shaking again. "Yes." "How many?" 17. The number comes out as a whisper. Morrison writes this in a notebook, the scratch of pencil on paper. He doesn't look angry, doesn't look like anything. Just writes it down like he's recording the weather. "You feel nothing when you did it? Cold? Professional?" This Carlo wasn't prepared for. "No, His throat closes. "I felt it every time. Every single one. I told myself I was protecting my brothers, my unit, that you were invaders." The words tumble out now, unstoppable. That we were defending our homeland from, he can't finish, because they all knew, after Mussolini fell in July, they all knew they were defending nothing. Defending German interests on Italian soil while the Reich bled them dry. But they kept fighting anyway because desertion meant execution, and what else could a soldier do? Morrison leans back in his chair, takes another sip of coffee. Outside, Carlo can hear other prisoners being moved through the facility, boots on concrete, orders in English. "You know what happened yesterday?" Morrison's voice is still conversational. "German sniper near Messina. Killed one of ours. 20-year-old kid from Wisconsin. First week in country. Shot him through the throat while he was filling his canteen." Carlo closes his eyes. Here it comes. The equation balancing. 17 Americans for 17 Axis prisoners. Mathematics of blood. "You know what our guys did when they caught that German?" Carlo waits for it. The beating. The summary justice in a ditch. What he would have expected. They gave him water and sent him to a POW camp. "Same as you." Carlo's eyes open. Morrison continues, his Brooklyn Italian precise and clear. "You know why? Not because that sniper deserved it. Maybe he didn't. Maybe you don't either. But because we're not going to become what we're fighting against." He taps his pencil on the notebook. "You shoot one of ours, we don't line prisoners against a wall. We don't beat them. We don't leave them in the sun without water like you people did in Libya." The words hit like body blows. Carlo thinks of the stories from Ethiopia, the partisans near Rome, things he saw but didn't stop because he told himself he was just a sniper, just following orders, just protecting his unit. Morrison stands up. The interview is over. That's it. Just coffee and questions and the truth delivered in his grandmother's dialect. "Your war's over, Carlo." Morrison walks to the tent flap, then pauses. "You get to go home after this. Back to Sicily. Back to your family. You get to live." He looks back. Think about that. Think about what you'd be doing right now if the key situations were reversed. If you'd caught an American sniper on Italian soil. Carlo knows exactly what would have happened. The image forms before he can stop it. The rifle butt, the ditch, the single shot. Quick if the prisoner was lucky. Slower if he wasn't. Morrison leaves. The tent flap closes. Carlo sits alone with the cooling coffee, the ceramic mug still warm in his hands. He stares into the dark liquid and sees his own reflection rippling on the surface. A stranger's face, eyes hollowed by something worse than fear. They could have done anything to him. He was a sniper. He'd killed 17 of their soldiers. 17 sons, brothers, husbands. 17 families back in America who would get telegrams and folded flags. Instead, they gave him morphine and chicken soup and real coffee. The mug trembles in his grip. A few drops spill onto the wooden table. He thinks about the notches he almost carved into his rifle stock, about his spotter stopping him because it's bad luck, makes you count them, makes you think of them as people. About the face he saw through his scope 2 weeks ago, the American lieutenant who'd been reading a letter when Carlo's bullet found him, about how the man's hands had still been holding the paper when he fell. Morrison's question echoes. What would you be doing if the situations were reversed? Carlo knows. God help him, he knows. The American captain had called it exactly right. The war isn't over because Italy switched sides or because the Allies are winning. The war is over because Carlo Benedetti can't be a soldier anymore, can't go back to the man who carved those 17 notches in his mind. His enemy showed him mercy he wouldn't have given. That's the crack that breaks everything else apart. He finishes the coffee. Every drop. It's the best thing he's tasted in 4 years and the most bitter. The projector hummed in the darkness, a mechanical heartbeat that filled the mess hall. Carlo sat 3 rows from the back, wedged between a German corporal who'd stopped talking weeks ago and an Italian private from Bologna who wouldn't shut up. The smell of popcorn, actual popcorn, 5 cents a bag from the canteen, mixed with the sweat of 200 men packed into folding chairs. The lights had gone down 2 minutes ago. Carlo's stomach tightened. He'd seen propaganda before. Italian newsreels showing the glorious conquest of Ethiopia. German films about the master race, every frame designed to make you forget you were starving. He expected American propaganda to follow the same template. Look how strong we are. Look how right we are. Look how you should fear us. The newsreel title appeared, Why We Fight, The Battle of Britain. The narrator's voice came through the speakers measured and calm, almost bored, like he was reading a weather report instead of describing a war. Then the footage started. Not what Carlo expected, not triumphant shots of American troops marching, instead, German camps. The camera didn't flinch. It showed everything. Skeletal figures behind wire, bodies stacked like cordwood, guards in uniforms Carlo recognized, some German, some Italian. He saw a prison doctor in an Italian uniform turning away from a man begging for water. Carlo's throat closed. The Bologna private beside him whispered something in dialect, stopped mid-word. On screen, the camera panned across a compound in Poland. The prisoners weren't soldiers. Women. Children. Their eyes were holes. Someone 3 rows ahead made a sound. Not quite a sob, more like air punched from lungs. The narrator continued in that same flat voice. These facilities were discovered by Allied forces advancing through Sicily and southern Italy. Documentation recovered on site confirms systematic brutality. New footage now. A camp in Libya. Carlo recognized the landscape. He'd trained there in 41. The camera showed Ethiopian prisoners, the same ones he'd seen left in the sun. But this footage was from later, from when someone finally gave them water. Too late. The narrator listed numbers, dates, survival rates. Carlo remembered the guard who'd laughed. Remembered turning away. The German corporal beside him started shaking. Just his hands at first, then his whole body. No sound. Just trembling. On screen, the footage shifted again. American soldiers now, but not marching in formation. They were handing out rations to German pews. The camera showed a Wehrmacht officer, his rank insignia still visible, receiving a full plate from a black American sergeant. The German's face showed what Carlo felt. Complete incomprehension. The narrator. These enemy combatants receive the same medical care, food rations, and shelter as American forces. This is not charity. This is the Geneva Convention, which the United States chooses to honor even when our enemies do not. Cut to a hospital tent. Carlo recognized the setup, the same one where the nurse had brought him soup. The camera panned across rows of wounded. Americans, Germans, Italians, all on identical cots, all receiving identical care. A doctor in a blood-stained coat worked on a German soldier's leg. The footage was raw, unedited. Carlo watched the doctor's hands move with the same careful precision he'd witnessed in Sicily. Someone was crying now, not hiding it, just crying openly in the dark. New footage, a POW camp. Carlo leaned forward. It was this camp, this mess hall. The camera showed prisoners playing soccer yesterday afternoon. He'd been there. He'd seen the American filming. It showed the classroom where they taught English, the workshop where they built furniture, the canteen where you could buy chocolate bars, then split screen. Left side, the skeletal prisoners from earlier. Right side, Carlo and his fellow POWs, healthy, fed, playing cards at a table just like the one he'd sat at this morning. The narrator's voice dropped lower. This is the difference between totalitarian rule and democratic principle. We treat our enemies with dignity, not because they deserve mercy, but because we deserve to remain human, because the moment we become the thing we're fighting, we've already lost the war that matters. The crying spread. The German corporal's shaking intensified. An Italian officer 2 rows up put his face in his hands. No one told them to be quiet. No one told them to be men about it. Carlo's vision blurred. He blinked hard, trying to focus on the screen. The newsreel showed American factories now, the staggering production numbers that had seemed like lies until he'd lived in this camp and seen the endless supply of everything. But the narrator wasn't gloating. He was explaining, in that same flat voice, why democracies outproduced dictatorships. Free men work harder than slaves. Free markets innovate faster than controlled economies. These are not accidents. These are the consequences of choosing humanity over ideology. The 17 faces cycled through Carlo's mind, the American lieutenant reading a letter, the corporal who'd been drinking coffee, the private who couldn't have been older than 19. He'd convinced himself they were invaders, that killing them was defending something sacred, but he'd known, even then. After Mussolini fell, they'd all known they were defending nothing but German interests on Italian soil, and they'd kept fighting anyway. On screen, footage of liberated towns in Sicily. Civilians cheering. American soldiers handing out rations to Italian children. The contrast between this and what Carlo had witnessed under Mussolini, the brutality, the casual cruelty, the contempt for human life, made his chest ache. The German corporal finally made a sound, a small, broken noise. The newsreel ended. The feature film started, some Hollywood comedy Carlo couldn't process, but the damage was done. In the darkness, the crying continued. 6 men, 7, maybe more. Germans and Italians both. No one laughed at them. No one suggested they be removed. Carlo kept his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. He thought about his spotter telling him to stop carving notches, to stop counting. "It's better if you don't know the number." his spotter had said. But Carlo knew. 17. He'd know until the day he died. The images from the newsreel played behind his eyes, the skeletal prisoners, the indifferent guards, the systematic cruelty. Then the counter-images. Goldstein's kind hands, Morrison's coffee, the nurse's smile, the doctor's 90-minute surgery to save an enemy's leg. 2 different worlds. 2 different choices about what it meant to have power over another human being. He'd chosen the wrong side. Not just wrong about the war's outcome, wrong about the fundamental equation of what made men human. The comedy on screen generated polite laughter from some prisoners. Others sat silent. The crying had mostly stopped, replaced by the sound of men breathing hard, trying to compose themselves. Carlo lowered his hands. His face was wet. The lights from the projector flickered across the faces around him. Germans who'd believed in the master race, Italians who'd believed in the glory of Rome, all of them confronted with the undeniable proof that their enemies were better men, not stronger, better. The Bologna private beside him whispered, "I wouldn't have done the same. If it was reversed." "No," Carlo said quietly, "none of us would have." That was the weapon that defeated them. Not the superior production numbers, not the material abundance. This, the decision to stay human when it would be easier not to treat enemies with the mercy they would never have shown, to prove, through actions not words, that democracy wasn't weakness but the hardest possible strength. The movie played on. Carlo stayed in his seat, unable to move, crushed by the weight of 17 notches and the gift of undeserved mercy. The letter sat on Carlo's workbench for 3 days before he opened it. Between cuts and shaves, his eyes drifted to the thin envelope, VA forwarding stamp in the corner, and his stomach would drop. 10 years since the war. 8 since he'd opened the barbershop on Federal Hill. He'd built something. A life, a family, a reputation for the cleanest fades in Providence. But those 17 notches never faded. Maria found him staring at it on the 3rd night. "You going to open that, or frame it?" His hands shook, cutting the envelope. Not the tremor of age. He was only 34, but the same shake he'd felt that day on Hill 340, watching the American medic approach with gentle hands instead of a pistol. "Dear Carlo, you probably don't remember me. I was the medic who treated you near Gala, Hill 340. July 43. Carlo's vision blurred. The barbershop chair, the mirrors, the familiar smell of talc and tonic, everything dissolved. He was back on that stone wall, shoulders screaming, tasting his own blood. I kept track of what happened to you through the Red Cross records. Then I saw your name in the Italian-American Business Association newsletter last month. Benedetti's Barbershop, Providence. I'm in Boston now, running a pharmacy on Com Ave. I wanted you to know. I'm glad you made it home. I'm glad you built a life." The letter continued, but Carlo had to stop. He set it down, pressed his palms against his eyes. Maria touched his shoulder, his left shoulder, the one Goldstein had bandaged, and he flinched. "What is it?" "The medic," he whispered, "from when they captured me." He picked up the letter again. "That's why we did what we did. Not to punish, but to give men like you a chance to become something other than what the war made you. Come visit sometime. Bring your family. My kids would like to meet yours." David Goldstein. Carlo read it 17 times, 1 for each man. Then he sat at the kitchen table, Maria asleep, the house quiet except for the refrigerator's hum, and started writing. Back. The words came hard, each sentence excavated from a place he'd tried to seal shut. "Dear David, I remember everything. Your hands cutting the wire, the water from your canteen, fresh water, not the dregs, the morphine, the cigarette. I remember watching you move to the next wounded man, a German, and treating him the same way you treated me." His pen stopped. How to explain the notches? How to confess to a man who'd saved you that you'd have let him die? "I was a sniper. You probably knew that. My spotter told your men. I killed 17 Americans. I carved notches in my rifle stock until my spotter made me stop. said it was bad luck to count. I kept counting anyway, in my head. When you knelt beside me that day, I thought, they don't know yet. When they find out, they'll shoot me. But you already knew. Everyone knew. You gave me morphine anyway. The words flowed faster now, cramped handwriting filling page after page. You have to understand what I expected. I'd seen what we did, what Italians did, what Germans did to prisoners. In Ethiopia, in Libya, in our own country after Mussolini fell. I knew what I deserved. Instead, you gave me chicken soup. The nurse smiled at me, even though my cot was tagged sniper. The doctor worked 90 minutes to save a German's leg. Captain Morrison gave me real coffee and told me my war was over, told me I'd get to go home. I threw up the soup. Not because it was bad, because I couldn't swallow the kindness, because I knew, sitting in that hospital tent, that if our positions were reversed, I wouldn't have done the same. 4 hours. The letter ran 7 pages. He told Goldstein about the movie night, the footage from the camps, the sound of German and Italian prisoners weeping in the darkness. He told him about the canteen, the one Goldstein had let him keep, sitting now on his barbershop shelf, never drunk from, never discarded. You spared me, and I wouldn't have done the same. I have to live with that. Every day, I live with that. But because you spared me, I get to teach my daughters to be better than I was. You didn't just save my life. You saved what my life could become. I tell people about you. When they ask about the canteen, and they always ask about the canteen, I tell them everything. About Hill 340. About expecting a bullet and getting morphine instead. About how an American medic taught a fascist sniper what honor actually means. Your children should meet mine. Not so they can forgive me, I can't ask for that, but so they can see what their father built. You didn't just save one Italian sniper, you proved that mercy is stronger than bullets. He mailed it the next morning, hands still shaking. 2 weeks later, Goldstein's reply arrived. Shorter this time. An invitation to the Berkshires that summer. A photograph. David with his wife and 3 kids standing in front of the pharmacy. On the back, in David's handwriting, we all get to become something better. That's the whole point. August 1955. The Berkshires smelled like pine and clean water, nothing like Sicily's dust and cordite. Carlo's daughters, 7 and 5, splashed in the lake with Goldstein's children while the adults sat on the cabin porch. They didn't talk much about the war. What was there to say? David looked older, grayer at the temples, reading glasses perched on his nose. Carlo wondered if his own hands looked as weathered now, if the years showed the same way. "You still have the canteen?" David asked. "On my shelf, between the mirror and the cash register. You ever drink from it?" "No, it's not for drinking." David nodded. "Good. Keep it there. Keep telling the story." That evening, after the children were asleep, the 2 men sat by the lake. Carlo finally asked the question that had haunted him for 12 years. "Why? You knew what I was. Why save me?" David was quiet for a long time, skipping stones across the dark water. "You know how many wounded I treated in Sicily? Hundreds. Americans, Germans, Italians, doesn't matter. Know how many I asked if they deserved it? None. None. Because that's not the question. The question is, what kind of men do we want to be? What kind of country do we want to build?" He turned to Carlo. "If I'd left you bleeding on that hill, if we'd shot you or let you die, we'd have proven Mussolini right. Proven that we're all just animals with different flags. I would have let you die." "I know. That's why I couldn't." The words hit Carlo like they had a decade before, not violently, but with the force of irrefutable truth. He thought about the 17 notches, about the nurse's smile, about Morrison's coffee, about the movie night and the sound of grown men weeping. "My daughters will never carve notches," he said quietly. "I know. That's what victory looks like." They sat until the stars came out, 2 men who'd met as enemies, bound now by something stronger than war. When they returned to the cabin, their wives were laughing in the kitchen and their children, 6 kids who wouldn't exist if Goldstein had chosen differently that day on Hill 340 slept soundly in shared rooms. The canteen stayed on Carlo's barbershop shelf for 43 years. He told the story to anyone who asked, and many who didn't. To nervous teenagers getting their first job interview cuts, to old men who'd fought their own wars, to his grandchildren, who barely believed wars like that had happened at all. "Why keep it if you never drink from it?" they'd ask. And Carlo would say, "Because some things aren't meant to be used. They're meant to be remembered." When he died in 1996, the canteen passed to his eldest daughter. She donated it to the Italian-American War Veterans Museum in Providence, with her father's 7-page letter displayed beside it. The placard reads, "This canteen belonged to U.S. Army medic David Goldstein, who gave water to his enemy on Hill 340, Sicily, July 1943, the Cud. Enemy, Carlo Benedetti, carried it for 53 years, not as a trophy, but as proof that mercy is the most powerful weapon. Goldstein's children and Benedetti's children still meet every August in the Berkshires. Their children come now, too. None of them carve notches. None of them need to. The story tells itself."